In the spring of 279 BC, on the plain of Asculum, in the southern Italian region of Apulia, King Pyrrhus of Epirus met the consular legions of the Roman Republic in a brutal two-day collision of empires. By sunset on the second day, the Greek sovereign held the battlefield, having driven the Romans back into their camp and leaving 6,000 enemy legionaries dead. Yet as Pyrrhus stood looking upon the motionless bodies of his fallen royal guards, the irreplaceable core of his veteran officer corps, his tactical triumph revealed a fatal strategic paradox. The Epirote king possessed brilliant battlefield command, superior combined arms tactics, and formidable war elephants. But every enemy soldier he eliminated was seamlessly replaced by Rome's vast institutional manpower reservoir. Surveying the 3,500 dead among his own finest ranks, Pyrrhus uttered his famous warning: "If we are victorious in one more battle with the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined." Defeating Rome on the field was actively consuming the very foundation of his kingdom. Welcome back to World Chronicles. Today, we break down the Battle of Asculum, the tactical collision between the Macedonian phalanx and the Roman manipular legion, the myth versus reality of Rome's anti-elephant war wagons, and the underlying logistical asymmetry that turned a battlefield triumph into a death sentence. To understand how a tactical masterpiece turned into a death sentence for Epirus, we must look back to the catalyst for conflict in southern Italy, a region known as Magna Graecia. Following three Samnite wars between 343 and 290 BC, the Roman Republic consolidated control over central Italy and expanded southward. In 282 BC, Thurii requested Roman military aid against Lucanian raiders. Rome responded by placing garrisons in Thurii, Locri, and Rhegium. This expansion alarmed Tarentum, the primary Greek mercantile power in Italy. Tarentine leaders viewed Roman warships in the Gulf of Taranto as a violation of a treaty barring Roman vessels east of the Licinian promontory. The Tarentine politician Philocharis launched a naval attack, sinking 4 Roman ships and driving Rome's garrison from Thurii. When Roman envoy Lucius Postumius Megellus arrived in early 281 BC demanding restitution, Tarentine magistrates rejected the ultimatum. Facing imminent war against consular armies, Tarentum sought assistance across the Ionian Sea. They appealed to King Pyrrhus of Epirus, offering supreme command and claiming an Italian allied force of 350,000 infantry and 20,000 cavalry was prepared to join his campaign. Pyrrhus was a product of the post-Alexandrian Hellenistic world. Born around 319 BC into the Molossian Aeacid dynasty, his youth involved political exile, but he earned a tactical reputation at the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC. Restored to the Epirote throne in 297 BC with support from Ptolemy I Soter of Egypt, Pyrrhus developed Epirus into a formidable regional power. While later Roman sources claimed Pyrrhus aimed to conquer Rome, Sicily, and Carthage immediately, modern historical consensus indicates his immediate objective was establishing a unified Hellenistic hegemony over Magna Graecia. In late 281 BC, Pyrrhus sent his diplomat Cineas with 3,000 troops to secure Tarentum. When the main invasion fleet sailed, a winter storm dispersed his ships across the sea before the king landed his core force. Upon arrival, Pyrrhus established a strict military regime in Tarentum. He suspended public assemblies, closed theaters, and conscripted the Greek populace into mandatory drill units. This authoritarian rule caused local friction, leading cities like Rhegium to reject the alliance and accept Roman garrisons instead. In the campaigning season of 280 BC, Roman consul Publius Valerius Laevinus marched a consular army of roughly 20,000 to 30,000 men into Lucania to intercept the Epirote forces before they could fully coalesce with their Italic allies. Pyrrhus met them near the coastal Greek city of Heraclea along the Siris River, deploying an army of approximately 25,000 men. His core force comprised 16,000 professional phalangites, organized into traditional Epirote and Macedonian formations, supplemented by 3,000 cavalry, Cretan archers, slingers, and 20 war elephants on loan from Ptolemy II Philadelphus. Seeking to stall until additional Samnite and Lucanian contingents arrived, Pyrrhus offered to arbitrate the dispute between Rome and Tarentum. Laevinus bluntly rejected the offer, signaling that Rome would settle the matter solely through arms. When the engagement began, Roman cavalry successfully crossed the Siris upstream, threatening the Epirote flanks and forcing Pyrrhus to move his army forward to contest the crossing. What followed was the first historical collision between the rigid Macedonian phalanx and the flexible Roman manipular legion. The clash produced brutal frontal grinding, with the legionaries attempting to hack through the dense forest of 18-foot sarissa pikes, while the phalanx pushed forward in an unbroken wall of bronze and steel. 7 successive charges surged back and forth across the riverbank without a decisive breach. Recognizing that his distinct royal armor made him a primary target for Roman horsemen, Pyrrhus swapped his gilded breastplate and cloak with his lieutenant Megacles. The deception backfired when a Frentanian cavalryman killed Megacles, prompting the Roman lines to cheer that the Epirote king was dead. Panic rippled through the Epirote ranks until Pyrrhus stripped off his helmet and rode bareheaded along the front lines, shouting to restore discipline. The tactical deadlock was broken late in the afternoon when Pyrrhus unleashed his 20 war elephants against the Roman flanks, a tactical element the legions had never before encountered. Unaccustomed to these towering beasts, the horses of the Roman cavalry panicked at the sight and unfamiliar scent, rearing uncontrollably and throwing their riders into confusion. With the Roman horsemen routed, Pyrrhus committed his elite Thessalian cavalry to sweep around the exposed flanks. The Roman legions broke their ranks and retreated across the Siris in a structured night withdrawal, avoiding total destruction only because a wounded war elephant panicked and threw the Epirote pursuit into temporary disarray. The true cost of Heraclea remains a subject of historical debate among ancient sources. Dionysius of Halicarnassus records an exaggerated toll of 15,000 Roman fatalities alongside 13,000 Epirote dead. Conversely, Hieronymus of Cardia, whose contemporary account, based on first-hand sources, is viewed by modern historians as far more reliable, states that the Romans lost 7,000 men, while Pyrrhus suffered 4,000 casualties. Though Pyrrhus held the battlefield, captured the Roman encampment, and convinced hesitant Italic tribes like the Lucanians and Samnites to join his coalition, his victory carried a bitter undertone. His casualties were disproportionately concentrated among his corps of veteran Epirote phalangites and senior commanders, men trained over decades whom he had no capacity to replace in Italy. Following his tactical success at Heraclea, Pyrrhus marched within 35 miles of Rome and dispatched his court diplomat Cineas to the city, bearing terms that demanded autonomy for Tarentum and the southern Italic tribes in exchange for an end to hostilities. Weakened by heavy losses and intimidated by the king's tactical reputation, the Roman Senate wavered and openly debated accepting the peace proposal. The hesitation ended when Appius Claudius Caecus, an aged blind former censor and consul, was carried into the Senate house by his family. In a fiery address, the infirm statesman rebuked the assembly for considering terms with an invader standing on Italian soil, establishing a foundational doctrine of Roman foreign policy. Rome would never negotiate peace with a foreign enemy until that enemy had completely evacuated Italy. Cineas returned to Pyrrhus empty-handed, observing to his monarch that the Roman Senate appeared not as a mere political council, but as an assembly of kings. Rather than conceding, the Roman Republic mobilized 2 complete consular armies for the campaign season of 279 BC, appointing consuls Publius Sulpicius Saverio and Publius Decius Mus to joint command. Mobilizing both Roman citizen legionaries and Latin allied contingents, the Republic assembled a massive force numbering approximately 40,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry. Recognizing that Pyrrhus relied heavily on his war elephants to shatter the manipular formations, Roman military engineers designed an innovative technological countermeasure specifically for the upcoming campaign. They constructed 300 specialized 4-wheeled anti-elephant war wagons. These heavy mechanical engines were equipped with long, movable iron-tipped spiked beams, iron grappling hooks, and mounted cauldrons designed to launch burning pitch and fire throwers directly into the faces of the armored pachyderms. As spring arrived, the consular armies marched east into Apulia to intercept the Epirote forces, seeking to protect Roman military colonies at Luceria and Venusia. Pyrrhus advanced north from his winter quarters to meet them, assembling a combined force of roughly 40,000 men composed of his Epirote corps, Macedonian Phalangite mercenaries, and Italic allies including Samnites, Daunians, and Lucanians. The 2 armies established their encampments near Asculum, along the banks of the Aufidus River, where the terrain was intersected by deep gullies, dense brush, and steep riverbeds. For Pyrrhus, the terrain presented an operational dilemma. The broken ground favored the flexible tactical maneuvering of the Roman manipular legions, while severely hindering the cohesive sweep of his sarissa-armed phalanx and armored cavalry. Both commanders understood that the impending engagement would decide the fate of southern Italy. While Roman troops gained confidence from their newly fielded mechanical war wagons, Pyrrhus sought to maneuver the legions out of the river valley onto the flatter plains nearby, where his combined arms tactics could achieve maximum destruction. On the first morning at Asculum in 279 BC, the engagement began as the Roman consular armies crossed the river tributaries to force battle along the wooded slopes. The physical geography immediately dictated the tactical parameters. Steep, mud-slicked riverbanks, dense brush, and thick oak woods prevented Pyrrhus from extending his pike line into an unbroken formation. The 16-rank deep Macedonian phalanx required flat, clear ground to generate its forward momentum. Amidst the trees and rocky gullies, gaps opened between the files. Pyrrhus's elite Thessalian cavalry and his 20 war elephants were rendered virtually useless, jammed in narrow passes where maneuvering proved impossible. Seeing the phalanx falter in the undergrowth, the Roman consuls committed their legionaries into the emerging gaps. Operating in small, modular maniples, the Romans exploited the broken terrain. Throwing their heavy pila at close range into the fractured pike walls, the legionaries closed the distance with their short gladii, engaging the phalangites in hand-to-hand combat where long sarissas were cumbersome liabilities. The Greek center held through stubborn discipline, but the engagement degenerated into a grinding, attritional struggle across the forest floor, with neither army able to deliver a decisive tactical blow. While the main forces locked in an inconclusive struggle along the riverbanks, a secondary disaster struck the Epirote rear. A detachment of Roman allies, identified in ancient traditions as either Daunian contingents from Arpi or Samnite raiders, circumvented the main battle line and penetrated Pyrrhus's rear areas. Falling upon the poorly guarded Epirote baggage camp, the raiders set fire to tents and plundered essential supplies. When reports reached Pyrrhus, he was forced to detach a portion of his reserves and cavalry from the front line to secure his rear, further stalling his offensive momentum. As darkness fell over Apulia, both commanders ordered a tactical disengagement, drawing their battered formations back from the woods. Day 1 ended in a bloody, inconclusive stalemate, but the logistical balance favored Rome. While the Roman legions withdrew in disciplined order to their secure, fortified camp across the river, Pyrrhus found his primary bivouac destroyed and his provisions scattered. His soldiers, exhausted from hours of grueling woodland combat, were forced to remain under arms on the chilly, open plain through the night. Pyrrhus personally moved among his units, directing working parties to reform the broken lines under the dark sky, realizing that if Day 2 was fought on the same ground, his army would be worn down to nothing. Before dawn broke on the second day, Pyrrhus executed a swift tactical maneuver that rectified the terrain disadvantages of the previous day. He dispatched a vanguard of light infantry to occupy the steep, wooded riverbanks that had severely fractured his ranks on Day 1. By securing these positions early, he prevented the Roman consuls from pinning his forces against the gullies. When the main consular armies marched out of their camp, they found themselves maneuvered onto an open, flat plain. Here, on unobstructed ground, Pyrrhus assembled his entire line, the Macedonian phalanx forming an interlocking wall of bronze pikes, flanked by Thessalian heavy horse and his war elephants. With the battlefield terrain now favoring Hellenistic doctrine, the Epirote phalanx surged forward in disciplined files, using its superior reach to press the Roman legions backward. Desperate to halt the advance, the Roman commanders ordered their 300 specialized anti-elephant war wagons to the front. However, Pyrrhus's tactical flexibility countered the mechanical innovation. Rather than letting the beasts charge blindly into the spiked beams and pitch throwers, Pyrrhus ordered his light infantry, Cretan archers, slingers, and javelineers, to sweep around the flanks of the engines. Concentrating a lethal hail of missiles on the unarmored operators, the light troops killed or drove off the crews before the wagons could be brought to bear, completely neutralizing Rome's technological gamble. With the war wagons abandoned and idle on the field, Pyrrhus launched his war elephants in tandem with a heavy cavalry charge. The armored beasts surged through the gaps left by the neutralized engines, smashing into the densely packed Roman center. The sheer mass of the elephants, combined with the screaming confusion of the assault, shattered the cohesion of the forward manipular lines. Roman legionaries, unable to hold their ground against the momentum of the pachyderms and the bristling pike wall behind them, began to yield the center of the field. Despite the collapse of their front lines, the engagement did not devolve into a catastrophic slaughter. In ancient military mechanics, the vast majority of battlefield casualties occurred during an unraveled rout when panic-stricken soldiers threw away their shields and were cut down from behind by pursuit cavalry. However, the Roman legionaries maintained remarkable tactical discipline. Forming tightly locked shield walls, the rear ranks covered the withdrawal, retreating step by step up the incline toward their fortified camp. This orderly withdrawal prevented Pyrrhus's cavalry from executing a devastating pursuit, allowing the Romans to save the core of their army. According to Pyrrhus's court memoirs recorded by Plutarch and Dionysius, the Romans suffered approximately 6,000 dead, while the Epirote coalition lost 3,500 to 3,550 men. Though the Romans lost nearly double the soldiers, the nature of Pyrrhus's casualties was fatal to his campaign. The king had lost almost all of his senior tactical commanders, personal companions, and elite veteran phalangites. Standing among the bodies of his most trusted officers, Pyrrhus realized that while he had won the ground, he had severely eroded his ability to prosecute the war. In the Hellenistic world, a victory achieved at the cost of catastrophic self-destruction was known as a Cadmean victory, a historical reference to King Cadmos of Thebes, who killed a dragon guarding a sacred spring but lost his entire entourage in the process. The phrase Pyrrhic victory is a modern linguistic creation derived centuries later from Plutarch's biography of the Epirote king. What Pyrrhus experienced at Asculum was not merely a bloody tactical triumph, but the immediate exposure of a profound structural asymmetry between two fundamentally incompatible military models. Pyrrhus was fighting a classic war of maneuver and decisive field engagement, expecting his adversary to sue for terms. The Roman Republic, however, was executing an early form of total societal mobilization. The core of the Epirote army relied upon highly trained, professional phalangites whose complex tactical drill required years of specialized conditioning to master. Replacing a fallen royal guardsman or a veteran officer meant sending recruiters back to Epirus, assembling replacements at Adriatic ports, and risking a hazardous transit across the Ionian Sea, a supply line constantly threatened by winter weather and hostile fleets. In Italy, Pyrrhus could recruit local Samnite or Lucanian infantry, but these allied levies lacked the rigid cohesion of his native Greek phalanx. Every veteran lost in Apulia represented a permanent, non-renewable drain on the kingdom's military capital. In contrast, the Roman Republic operated on an expansive demographic foundation built through its unique system of Italian alliances known as the socii. Unlike Hellenistic empires that extracted monetary tribute from subjugated subjects, Rome demanded military manpower. Defeated Italian polities were integrated into a treaty network that obliged them to supply fully equipped cohorts upon demand. As Plutarch famously recorded, while Pyrrhus watched his veteran ranks wither without hope of reinforcement, the Roman camp was replenished continuously, as if from a fountain gushing forth indoors. The Senate did not view a lost army as a reason to negotiate. It viewed a lost army as an administrative signal to call up the next class of conscripts. Official Roman census records, preserved from this era, provide quantitative proof of this demographic strain. Between 280 BC and 275 BC, the recorded population of adult male Roman citizens dropped by 5.5%, falling from 287,222 down to 271,224. To sustain these heavy losses without capitulating, the Roman state enforced conscription with unyielding harshness. When draft resistance surfaced in the city, Consul Manius Curius Dentatus publicly proclaimed that any citizen refusing his military summons would have his property confiscated and be sold into foreign slavery. This administrative coercion transformed Roman society into a self-renewing engine of war. This logistical asymmetry was further exacerbated by the mechanics of ancient battle, because ancient casualties spiked dramatically when an army's cohesion broke into a panicked flight. Pyrrhus's inability to shatter the disciplined Roman retreat meant he could never inflict the sweeping annihilation rates typical of Hellenistic routes. The legionaries retreated behind locked shields into their palisaded camp, keeping casualty ratios surprisingly narrow. On the tactical ledger, Pyrrhus was a master of chess. On the strategic ledger, the Roman state was simply draining his bank account until he reached absolute bankruptcy. Realizing that every victory in Italy was bringing him closer to total collapse, King Pyrrhus looked for a way out of the Italian peninsula. In 279 BC, while Pyrrhus hesitated in Apulia, the geopolitical chessboard shifted against him. Recognizing the shared threat of Epirote expansion, the Roman Republic and Carthage concluded an explicit military alliance. Carthage dispatched an admiral with a fleet of 120 warships to Ostia, extending naval support to help isolate Pyrrhus from sea lines of communication. Seeking a strategic pivot, Pyrrhus accepted an urgent plea from Syracuse in 278 BC to lead the Sicilian Greeks against Carthaginian encirclement. Evading enemy patrols, he landed in Sicily, rapidly lifted the siege of Syracuse, and gathered a coalition force of 30,000 infantry and 2,500 horse. Over the next 2 years, he drove Carthaginian forces across the island, capturing the fortified stronghold of Mount Eryx through personal bravado on the battlements. Pyrrhus's Sicilian campaign stalled before Lilybaeum, the heavily fortified Carthaginian headquarters on the western tip of the island. Lacking a powerful fleet to blockade the port, Pyrrhus watched Carthaginian naval transports endlessly resupply the garrison. When Carthaginian envoys offered generous subsidies if he would leave them, Lilybaeum, Pyrrhus refused, demanding complete Punic evacuation of Sicily. To build an offensive fleet capable of challenging Carthage at sea, he demanded heavy monetary levies and conscripts from the Sicilian Greek cities. When local leaders resisted, Pyrrhus imposed an autocratic military dictatorship, installing garrisons and executing suspected conspirators. Alienated by his heavy-handed rule, several Sicilian cities defected or opened secret negotiations with Carthage, rendering his position on the island unviable. With renewed Roman offensives threatening his Italic allies, Pyrrhus evacuated Sicily in early 276 BC, observing grimly to his officers that he was leaving a vast wrestling ring for Rome and Carthage to fight over. His return voyage proved disastrous. Carthaginian warships intercepted his fleet, sinking dozens of transports, while Mamertine mercenaries ambushed his rearguard on land. Facing a desperate treasury shortage and deserted by Samnite allies who felt abandoned by his Sicilian excursion, Pyrrhus sought funds in southern Italy. He authorized his officers to seize the sacred treasure from the Temple of Persephone at Locri. Ancient traditions record that when violent gales subsequently wrecked the gold-laden ships along the coast, a superstitious Pyrrhus returned the washed-up thalers to the sanctuary in a futile effort to placate divine anger. In 275 BC, Pyrrhus initiated his final military gambit in Italy, marching into Samnium with roughly 20,000 to 25,000 men to attack Consul Manius Curius Dentatus before a second consular army could join him. Staged near Maleventum, later renamed Beneventum, Pyrrhus ordered a risky nocturnal march through mountainous, heavily forested terrain to seize the high ground above the Roman camp. The Epirote vanguard lost its way in the dark woods, failing to reach their positions before sunrise. Alerted to the movement, Dentatus launched an immediate counterattack on the disoriented column. When Pyrrhus deployed his remaining war elephants to stabilize the field, Roman legionaries responded with tactical innovation, hurling flaming javelins and burning arrows into the beasts. Crazed with pain, The elephants panicked, turning backward to crush the Epirote infantry ranks. Whether Beneventum was an outright Roman tactical victory or a bloody strategic stalemate, the outcome destroyed Pyrrhus's operational capacity in Italy. Depleted of veteran soldiers, out of funds, and denied aid by Antigonus II Gonatas of Macedon, Pyrrhus recognized that his Italian enterprise was over. In late 275 BC or early 274 BC, he abandoned the peninsula, sailing back to Epirus with merely 8,000 infantry and 500 horsemen, the depleted remnants of the grand combined arms force he had led across the sea 6 years prior. He left a small garrison in Tarentum under his son Helenus, but the city's fall to Rome was now only a matter of time. Upon returning to Greece, Pyrrhus could not remain idle. Needing funds to pay his remaining mercenaries, he invaded Macedonia in 274 BC, temporarily ousting Antigonus II Gonatas before turning his ambitions toward the Peloponnese. In 272 BC, while intervening in a civic dispute in Argos, the king led his troops into narrow, crowded city streets under the cover of night. Trapped in a confused melee, Pyrrhus engaged an Argive soldier. Watching from a tiled roof above, the soldier's elderly mother saw her son in danger and hurled a heavy terracotta roof tile with both hands. The missile struck the king on the exposed back of his neck, fracturing his spine and paralyzing him. Unconscious, Pyrrhus was dragged into a doorway by a Macedonian soldier named Zopyrus and ineptly beheaded. It was an abrupt end for a monarch whom Hannibal Barca would later rank as the second greatest military commander in history, behind only Alexander the Great. With Pyrrhus dead, the resistance of Magna Graecia collapsed rapidly. In 272 BC, the Epirote garrison at Tarentum surrendered, and the city was forced into a formal alliance with Rome. Within a few short years, the Roman Republic established unquestioned hegemony over Samnium, Lucania, Bruttium, and the Greek cities of the Italian peninsula. The Mediterranean world took immediate notice. In 273 BC, observing Rome's resilience against a premier Hellenistic general, Ptolemy II Philadelphus of Egypt dispatched an embassy to the Senate, establishing formal diplomatic ties and acknowledging the Republic as a major Mediterranean power. This conflict fundamentally reshaped military terminology and Western geopolitical history. While ancient Greeks classified self-destructive triumphs as Cadmean victories, the legacy of Asculum transformed the language of warfare. Through later modern readings of Plutarch, the phrase Pyrrhic victory became the enduring universal term for a success bought at the price of ruin. More critically, Rome's absorption of Magna Graecia pushed its strategic horizon directly to the Straits of Messina. By expanding its borders to the southern tip of the peninsula, the Republic stood face to face across the narrow waters with Carthage, setting the stage for the First Punic War in 264 BC. Pyrrhus was a genius of a fading age, an era of personal bravado, tactical brilliance, and wandering conquerors. Rome represented the future, a system of administrative bureaucracy, inexhaustible manpower, and unyielding institutional willpower. The Eagle King had won every battle on the field, yet the Republic had won the West. Subscribe to World Chronicles to join us for the next chapter in the rise and fall of ancient empires.